Welcome to the third video in the series. And in this video, we're going to make this wave look nice. So we're going to shade the wave. All we've done so far is calculate the wave and crudely visualize it over here. But if we were to render that, it just wouldn't look real good. In fact, let's go ahead and make this window larger. Click the camera button, and this will be the view through the camera. So if we render, that's what we're going to see. I think we can make that a little bit bigger. But notice if we try to orbit, it breaks out of that view. We would like to be able to orbit in a way that moves the camera while we're seeing it. It makes it much easier to position things. So on this View tab, click on Camera. Now when we orbit, it's actually moving the camera. So we can zoom in and make this look pretty good. Okay, if we want to render, we'll say render image. And now that does not look pretty good. One thing that's happening, we've got a shadow here. Waves aren't going to give shadows, and we'd like to see colors and all that. So we had some work to do. I'm going to delete this light because the waves will provide the light. We're going to set an emission, and I think that looks really good for a black background. Okay, now we'll go to this divider and drag it over again. We don't need a huge view over here, and we're looking at our shader now. And if you lose the nodes, just sort of scroll around. Let's click on the object, and there they are. There's the nodes. So this is where we were last time. So we want to add some color. What comes out of this cosine function is something that goes from -1 to 1. Blender, when it colors things, it likes things to go from 0 to 1. So we want to map this -1 to +1 to go 0 to 1. So the way we'll do that is we'll use a map range node. So click on add and type in map space, and I just had to type in R, and the map range was the option. And we can go ahead and just drop that in between. It automatically connects that up. So we have this cosine function. So we have something going from -1 to +1 coming in. So these first two fields are telling us what are the limits of what's coming in. And so this minimum we want to set to -1. So what's coming in goes from -1 to +1. What's going out is now going to go from 0 to +1. So that's a map range. Now from there, we can color it because now what's coming out goes from 0 to 1. Notice the color looks a little bit different in the image in the lower right. So. All right, so we can add the colors and adjust the colors through a color ramp node. So let's zoom in on this area, and we're going to add color space R, and then the color ramp is what came up. And I will drop that in. Now, right now, that did absolutely nothing. It was already by default setting 0 to black and 1 to white. And we want to make these different colors. And we want to add some other stops here. We'll do a little bit of a sophisticated color map here. So I'm going to hit the plus, and we're going to want one over near the left. I'll hit the plus again. We'll move that new one up here, hit plus again, and plus again. And then these middle two, we'll just kind of, we'll type in specific numbers in a minute. We'll just get them roughly laid out. So the second to leftmost one, I don't know if I'm saying that right, the one right here, we're going to click on that, and the color associated with that pops up here. I want to make that blue, so I'll type hex and do 0000FF. That makes it pure RGB blue. Likewise, this next one, I also want to be pure RGB blue. So that's 0000FF. Now the next two, I want to make RGB red. So I'll click on the fourth one, and for red, it's FF0000. And the second to last one, I also want to be RGB red, so FF0000. We're doing good. Now, these extreme colors, when the value gets very intense, I like to change the color off of the hard blue and red. I think that looks really nice. So let's click on this first one, which is now black. And I'm going to drag this all the way up to white. And I'm going to select a color, I don't know, somewhere around here. So 00AEFF if you want to just type that in to match mine. And then this last one, which is white, we'll click on the white. And I'm going to drag that over to an orange. Whoops. There we go. Something like that. Now I want to set the positions a bit more precisely. So I'm going to click on this first blue one. And its position goes from 0 to 1. A 0 would be hard over to the left and a 1 hard over to the right. Let's make this 0.05. I'm going to click on that last red one and make that 0.95. Then the blue one in the middle here, I'm going to make that 0.495. And then the red one, I'm going to make 0.505. And they're going to be really, really close because I don't really want to see purple. I just want to see blue and red. And feel free to even make those closer if you want. So now I think we have a really good color map that I think works really well. But notice, I guess I tend to think of electromagnetic waves as being transparent, right? And so we're not able to see through this yet. And so to adjust the transparency, that's the alpha node right here. So if I were to lower this alpha, it should become transparent. Let's see what happens. Two things we're going to need to do. The first one is, okay, that is a view that would show transparency. Here's another view that would actually what it looks like when it's rendered. This previous one is more just showing very well the material shading, but if you want to see what it looks like when it's actually rendered, let's click on this last one. So that's the one I want to use right now, and we'll minimize that again. All right, so if I move alpha, remember we had two things to do, we've only done one. If I bring alpha down, it does not make it transparent. And this has a lot to do with the shader that we're using, and I don't want to get into a big thing on shaders, but we're using EV, which is the one that I tried to use, and if I can't, I will resort to Cycles. Cycles is a much, much better renderer, but it's also much, much slower. So I always try to get away with EV, and we will be able to do that here. But anyway, EV is taking a bunch of shortcuts in order to be fast. So anytime we want to do something like transparency or many other things, we have to go into EV and say, hey, we're doing these advanced things. So that's what we have to do. And so we'll click on the material tab because that's what we're adjusting here, and scroll down a little bit, and under settings, we'll see blend mode and shadow mode. The blend mode is set to opaque, so it will never be transparent while this is set to opaque. And there's a bunch of different ones. For waves, I think the alpha blend looks good. And then shadow mode, I just tend to put the alpha clip, although you won't notice much difference there because we don't really have any shadows going on. Now we can see through it, and we can adjust the alpha to anything that we might want. But what I like to do is adjust the alpha in proportion to the intensity of the wave. Also, this is pretty dim. I think we're going to want to brighten it up. And under emission, we can drag our color down to the color of emission. And you're going to notice this won't do much, and that's because the strength of the emission is set low. And just like we're going to do with alpha, we want it less transparent where the wave is most intense. We also want it to be brightest where the wave is most intense. So we're going to send the same number into both of those. But what number do we use? We can't use this 0 to 1 because we're sort of hiding what the cosine is doing. Actually, a 0 at this point is actually a very intense but negative field, and a 1 is an intense but a positive field. So what I like to do is actually go back to where this was still negative 1 to 1. Or I'm sorry, the 0 to 1 was after the map range. But I like to go back to where we had the negative 1 to positive 1, which is right here. And I'm going to duplicate the cosine node and drop it right below my map range. And I'm going to select absolute. And I'm going to drag the cosine into this. Now this number goes from 0 to 1, but 0 is where the wave intensity is 0, or wave amplitude is 0, and 1 is where it's intense. So I can drag this to alpha, and I can also drag it to strength. And wait a second or two for the renderer to catch up. And now we have a nice bright wave. We can see through it, and I think that looks really nice. If you want further controls, another thing you can do is drop multiply nodes over top of these so you can make it more or less bright or more or less transparent. For now, I'm going to stick with this default. But we can play with this a little bit. Let's go over to phase, and we can drag that, and we can watch that propagate. This plane in the YZ plane, if I was actually rendering something and I had a wave traveling in the X direction, I don't like how this looks like it's blinking, but it just has to do with the fact that it's tangential to the wave fronts. It's really good for troubleshooting, but if I was to make an actual render that looked good, I probably would not use that plane. All right, that is it for this Blender tutorial where we made the wave look nice. And in the remaining videos, we have a lot more ugly work to do. So I will see you in the next one.